Do you need a large emergency loan for bad credit, no personal guarantee, and next day funding? Then you really want to stick around till the end of today's conversation because I'm going to actually explain everything to you. I'm going to give you a step by step on getting a large emergency loan for bad credit, no personal guarantee, and next day funding. Welcome back, folks, to another edition of the Awesome Sweetie Kiwi Show. How are you today? I hope you are doing fantastic. I'm doing marvelous. If you were to ask me, if you are doing as great as I am, go grab a cup of coffee or tea or vodka and let's roll. In today's conversation, we're going to talk about a very important topic: money, 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 right? How do you get a large emergency loan for poor credit, no personal guarantee, and next day funding? An emergency loan can provide much needed cash during a difficult financial situation. We all know that. Everybody has been there, has done it, right? Some people are still in it. But if you have bad credit, you may be wondering if you can qualify for such a loan. The answer is yes. The bottom line is yes. You can get an emergency loan with bad credit, but your options may be limited. So you got to be strategic. And this is what I'm going to teach you in today's conversation. With less than ideal credit scores, you can generally expect to pay relatively high interest rates. So it is quintessential to shop around. You got to shop around to try to limit your cost. And by cost, I'm speaking about not just APR, your annual percentage rate. I'm also referring to origination fees. You have penalties, you have prepayment fees, and so on and so forth. We're going to try to actually reduce those. And you need to plan for emergencies. Now, you might be saying we should have talked about planning for emergency before the emergency happened. So even if it happens, you can still plan for the next emergency. There is a process you have to go by to make sure that whenever you have an emergency, you're able to mitigate the risk of that emergency sort of crippling you down financially speaking. You gotta set up an emergency fund. I don't care how much you put into that fund, but you gotta have a fund, folks. You need to have a fund. You need to have a rainy day account, or AKA an emergency account. And in that account, what do you put? You have to put at least up to 6 months worth of your living expenses. Okay. Now, this is not going to happen overnight, right? But if you start little, even if it's $5, $10, put it there and trying to do it automatically so you forget about it. And it has to be an account that you don't touch. Please don't touch that. You need to have an emergency fund. A lot of experts wants to tell you to have up to 6 months worth of expense. I say go even higher. Go to 9 months. 12 months. You want to cover at least 12 months worth of living expenses so that if something happens, you have the money to actually cover that emergency. And the loans I'll be talking to you I will be talking to you about in today's conversation. Those emergency loans can be used for a natural disaster event, a major car repair, a school fee for students, an unexpected trip to the hospital or doctor, or a big appliance replacement. So let's talk about the process, the step by step. Step number one, you need to know the types of emergency loans for poor credit. When we talk about getting a large emergency loan for bad credit, no personal guarantee, and next day funding, you got to have the different types. You need to understand the different types. When you want to look for emergency loan options for bad credit, you need to pay attention to online lenders. That's the first source of emergency loans for poor credit, because online lenders, guess what, are way cheaper than traditional banks. Then you want to think about credit unions. Credit unions are also cheap because they are nonprofit organizations owned by their members. So instead of maximizing profits to benefit third-party shareholders, credit unions use their revenue to provide lower interest rates and fees to their members. And in terms of credit union loans for emergencies, you actually have institutions that offer credit union loan options include PenFed Credit Union, for example, and First Tech Credit Union. We've covered those topics extensively in other shows, but I'm just giving you some examples. PenFed Credit Union is fantastic, and as a matter of fact, even though the credit union is affiliated with the military, you don't need to be a military. You don't need to be a serviceman or a reserve, whatever. You don't even need to have a family affiliation with the military. There are other ways to become a member of the PenFed Credit Union. Same thing with the First Tech Credit Union. There are ways, but those are great avenues for low cost emergency loans for bad credit. You also want to think about lending circles. A lending circle may be an option if there is a nonprofit or community organization in your area that provides them. Online, you can think about nonprofit lenders. For example, you have Kiva, even though sometimes they just cater to entrepreneurs. But yeah, you have to think about that. You also can think about getting a credit card cash advance. This could also be a great opportunity for emergency loan. If you are lucky enough to have a credit union credit card, those usually don't charge any fee for cash advances. It's pretty cool. And you can also think about payday loans. In general, it's best to avoid payday loans in a financial emergency. This is because payday loans charge staggering high interest rates. You can expect an APR in the neighborhood of 300% or 400% or higher. And in most cases, you'll have other options that are much cheaper and have more favorable repayment terms. So the very first step, if you want to get an emergency loan for bad credit, no personal guarantee, and next day funding, is to know the types of emergency loans for poor credit. Step number 2, folks, you need to understand how emergency loans for bad credit work. They work in a different way. So before I explain how they work, you have to understand, let's go back to the definition. Emergency loans 101. So an emergency loan is a term that describes several different ways you may be able to access cash for sudden, unexpected expenses. A common type of emergency loan, and often one of the most affordable options, is a personal loan. But an emergency loan may come in the form of a credit card cash advance, payday loan, payday alternative loan, or even a loan from a friend or family member. Okay? And you can certainly get an emergency loan with bad credit. No problem about it. And as I said before, you can actually get them from online lenders, credit unions, traditional banks, credit card companies, so on and so forth. And an emergency loan will impact your score. Yes, it will. Some types of emergency loan can affect your credit score, while others will not. Generally, I would say, based on our analysis, about 80% of emergency loans will affect your credit score. In other words, even if you pre-qualified, in which case they will just do a soft pull. Before they move on to before they actually disperse the real funds to you, the lender will do something called a hard pull. And a hard pull will actually knock off a few points of your credit score. That's just the way the game is played, and it's okay anyway. One thing you have to understand is that you need to choose the best emergency loan that works for you. And you have to think about whether you can afford a new monthly payment, whether the lender offers loans to borrower with poor credit, what does the lender charge for emergency loans? In other words, what's the APR range? Are there additional fees you should be aware of? How long you have to repay the loan? Is there a pre-qualification option to check your potential rate and loan offer in advance? How soon would you receive the funds if you qualify? So this is the kind of analytical journey you have to take to make sure that you're getting the best loan for you. And one thing I also want you to understand is that the way emergency loans for bad credit works can affect your credit score in the future. In other words, if God forbid you're not able to repay the loan, or something happens, life happens, stuff happens, and you can't repay, your already poor credit score will be damaged even further. So be very careful about that. And basically, the best way to prepare for an emergency expense so that you don't have to resort to an emergency loan is to track your spending. You need to create a realistic budget based on your monthly bills and spending habits. You need to find ways to cut your current expenses. You need to open a separate, what I called a rainy day account. And this has to be a dedicated savings account to tuck away money for emergencies. So once you know the types of emergency loans for poor credit, and you will understand how emergency loans for bad credit work, you need to compare emergency loans for poor credit. So there are different lenders out there. You can get lenders online. You can get credit union down the block where you live. You can get a loan from a traditional lender like a bank. You can get a payday loan. But how do you compare the emergency loans for poor credit? What are the metrics you have to pay attention to make sure nobody is ripping you off, right? you really want to pay attention to a couple of things. First, the funding speed. If you urgently need funds, consider a lender that offers fast funding. Sometimes you have same day funding, right? The loan cost. Speed may seem more important than loan cost, but it's still important to compare fees and annual percentage rates from multiple lenders. Most online lenders offer what they call pre-qualification. I just spoke about that because this involves a soft credit check and allows you to preview your rate and term without impacting your credit score. The loan with the lowest APR is the cheapest and usually the best choice as long as the monthly payments are affordable. You also want to pay attention. So besides the funding speed and loan cost, you want to pay attention to the lender features. So in addition to the rates and fees, consider payment options and other features. Some lenders let you choose your payment due date, which is great, forgive late fees, or allow you to skip a payment if necessary. Lenders may also provide financial education on their websites. You also want to pay attention to the lender reputation. You want to pick lenders that have great reviews for the way they treat customers, and they must be registered with the Better Business Bureau, the Triple B. You want to think about customer service. You want to think about interest rate discount availability, and you want to make sure you pick a lender that has full disclosure. In other words, you want to have a lender that is transparent in how they apply fees and how they communicate the fees, because the last thing you want is have a surprise fee. Nobody wants that. Nobody, I hate it personally. I'm sure you do too. You don't want a lender to actually screw you over, right? So pay attention to that. And one thing I want to be very careful about, and I want to tell you here, please be very wary of no credit check emergency loans. You want to be wary of lenders that don't check your credit when they offer you an emergency loan. Some no credit check installment loans share characteristics with conventional payday and auto title loans, including sky-high interest rates and additional fees that make the loan less affordable than you initially thought it would be. Some online lenders such as Rise and Up Loans, they offer emergency loans and are positioned as low-cost alternatives to payday loans. However, and we have seen this in our analysis, sometimes some of their rates are still high, and you should consider these lenders only after you have rolled out other lower cost options. I'll be right back right after this. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, folks, to another section of the Awesome Sweetie Kiwi Show. I'm still educating you here about how to get an emergency loan for poor credit, no personal guarantee, and next day funding. Step number one, you want to know the types of emergency loans for poor credit available out there. Step number two, you need to understand how emergency loans for bad credit work. Step number three, you need to compare emergency loans for poor credit, and I gave you the criteria you should use to compare those loans. Step number four, you need to pick the right emergency loan for bad credit. We have reviewed this on other shows, but I'm going to give you a few players here for you to consider. First, we have Monivo. So Monivo is a lending marketplace, so they're not a direct lender. They let you compare lenders and shop for the best deal. They work with over 30 loan providers. Best of all, their bad credit accommodations are exceptional with a minimum FICO score of just 450. Fantastic. Funding is pretty quick, with many lenders disbursing funds for the next business day. So fees and interest rates, the APRs range from 2.49% to 36%. Emergency loans for bad credit are unlikely to qualify for the lowest APRs. So depending on the lender and interest rate, depending on the lender, the interest rate may be fixed or variable. Some lenders on Monivo charge origination fees, and so this should be included in the APR. And you have the loan limits and terms. So you can go from $500 for a small loan to $100,000 if you need a lot of cash at once. Don't borrow more than you need. Okay, the repayment terms also have much more flexibility. You can pay your loan back in as little as 3 months or take as long as 144 months, which is 12 years. Next, we have Up Loans. So applicants whose low credit score don't get them qualified for traditional loans. They may have an easier time at Up Loans. And Up Loans is pretty cool. You can borrow up to, it really depends. You can borrow up to $50,000 in emergency fund. The APR is kind of high, very, very high, from 59% to 199%. Okay. And in terms of the loan limit, again, they go all the way to 50,000, but on average, based on our research, they will limit you around 4,000 and 10,000, between 4 and 10,000. Their terms are the shortest on the list. Here, they range from 9 months to 24 months, sometimes 36 months. And then we also have Upstart. So Upstart is kind of cool because they look beyond the credit score. They claim to be the first online lender to accept borrowers with no credit history at all. And in terms of the loan limits, you have it really depends. So they can lend you from 5,000 all the way to 30,000, and the loan terms can be 3 years or 5 years. And there are no prepayment penalties for paying off the loan early. So this is pretty interesting. And we love the fact that they will consider you if you have bad credit also. Another player you might be interested in, we have One Main Financial. And so if you are in need of emergency financial relief, you can trust a company like One Main Financial, and they have been in business for more than 100 years. That's a century. Think about that. Okay, and they will actually fund you. They will fund you depending on where you live, but the loan amounts range from $1,500 to $20,000 depending on your credit history, and the term lengths are 24, 36, 48, and 60 months, or 60 months rather. And they do have interest rates ranging from 18% to 36%, and no prepayment fees. And flat origination fees range from $25 to $400 based on your individual loan, and percentage-based origination fees. Okay, and this is something you need to think about. Then we also have the Lending Club, another great player. Lending Club offers a wide variety of loans, including loans for emergency loans for bad credit, no person guarantee. Okay, and APRs will range from 6% to 36%. You can borrow up to $40,000, and the terms are fairly standard, 3 or 5 years. Origination fees are on the high end at 2% to 6%. Something you need to keep in mind, okay? And we also have Lending Tree. Lending Tree is not a lender itself, but an online marketplace to comparison shop different lenders' rates side by side, okay? And really, in terms of funding, you can borrow between $1,000 to $50,000, making Lending Tree a good choice for those who need smaller loans. The terms here again are standard, 3 or 5 years. Okay, and in terms of the percentage are pretty. They are all over the place. You can go from 10% all the way to 27%. Okay, and I'm showing you right now on the screen, as you can see, a little recap of all of this lenders, so you have an idea of what we're talking about. So I want you to pay attention right now to look at the screen right now. Okay, so this here you have an idea of an overview of the best emergency loans for bad credit. You can see that here: Monivo, UpLoans, Upstart, One Main Financial, Lending Club, and Lending Tree. Okay. Number 5, folks. So after picking the right emergency loan for bad credit, you need to gather the required documentations. Very important. So emergency loans for bad credit, no personal guarantee, and next day funding require a certain preparation and certain paperwork. Sometimes the paperwork you can fax them, you can email them. Sometimes they want you to drop them at a local branch. For example, if you go with a credit union, they might want to see the paperwork themselves. But you need to gather the required documents. And so one thing, here are the 5 common requirements that financial institutions look at when evaluating your loan application. So you have your credit score and history, your income, your debt to income ratio, your collateral, if you are actually providing a collateral. But again, we are here in a no personal guarantee loan scheme, so a collateral will not really matter depending upon the loan. And you also have to pay attention to the origination fee. Though not part of the qualification process, many lenders require borrowers to pay personal loan or origination fees to cover the cost of processing applications, running credit checks, and closing. And these fees usually range between 1% and 8% of the total loan amount, depending on factors like the applicant's credit score and loan amounts. Some lenders collect origination fees as cash at closing, while others finance them as part of the loan amount or subtract them from the total loan amount dispersed at closing. A lender will pay attention to your credit score. It doesn't mean that your poor credit score will disqualify you. It just means for them that they need to know exactly what's going on in your credit history. All right. And many lenders will require applicants to have a minimum score of around 600 to qualify. But guess what? The lenders that we have, that I just gave you, that I've just talked about, those lenders will accept you even with the credit score as low as 450. You also want to pay attention to your debt to income ratio. DTI is pretty important. So DTI is really expressed as a percentage and represents the portion of a borrower's gross monthly income that goes toward his or her monthly debt service. And lenders use DTI to predict a prospective borrower's ability to make payments on new and current debt. And for that, a DTI less than 36% is ideal. In other words, one third of your income, nearly one third of your income, should go toward paying debt or repaying debt. Okay, and but the cool thing here is that lenders are flexible across the board. So even if you have a higher DTI, they might still consider you. In gathering the required documents to get an emergency loan for bad credit, no personal guarantee, and next day funding, you need to be aware of the typical personal loan documents. There are some loan documents that come, that they always ask for, all right? And so you have to think about the loan application itself. So the loan application is pretty straightforward. It is the formal document that lenders require prospective borrowers to complete and submit to begin the lending process. Some loan applications are digital, so you do everything online. Some you have to do on paper and fax it to the lender. And some are long, some are short, the application form. You also need to think about submitting proof of identity. Most lenders, especially those who would advance emergency loans for bad credit, no personal guarantee, and next day funding, they require applicants to provide at least 2 forms of government issued identification to prove they are at least 18 years old and a United States citizen or permanent resident. And this precaution also reduces the threat of identity theft. And acceptable forms of government issued ID often include driver's license, other state issued ID, passport, certificate of citizenship, birth certificate, and military ID. And some lenders will also want to see employer and income verification. So everything from pay stubs to tax returns to W-2s and 1099s, bank statements, employer contact information, those things will be reviewed during the loan review process or the loan underwriting process. Okay, and prospective borrowers who are self-employed must instead rely on bank statements, 1099 forms, and income tax returns. You also need to prove your address. So in addition to confirming your employment, most lenders want to know that you have a stable living situation, right? And this makes sense. They're just trying to cover their ass. They're trying to cover their butt. They're trying to mitigate risk here, the risk of default. So they want to make sure you have a stable foundation in your personal life. So this may involve providing proof of your address, right? Including a recent utility bill, a copy of your lease or other rental agreement, voter registration card or proof of home, rental or auto insurance that lists your address. Okay, so this is important. And so those, if you really have all those documents ready, you should be fine. You should be good to go. Once you apply, even if they ask for the documentation, you can just mail it, you can fax it, or you can email it to them very, very easily. And when we talk about gathering the required documentation, I also want you to think about one important element. What should you do if you are denied? Because there is a chance that you could be denied. I'm not guaranteeing that all of you listening to me right now will be approved, but there is a chance, as with everything in life, that sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it works the first time around, sometimes it doesn't. You have to reapply. You have to do this over 3 or 4 times before actually being approved. Now, what should you do if you are denied? A lender can deny your personal loan application for a number of reasons. Your credit score may be too low, or your DTI could be too high. It's also possible that you ask to borrow more money than the bank thinks you can repay based on factors like income, employment stability, or other outstanding debts, right? When we talk about a large emergency loan for bad credit, no personal guarantee, and next day funding, large here means all the way to $100,000. So if a lender denies your personal loan application, there are a few steps you can take to improve your chances of getting a loan in the future. Ask for the specific reason your application was rejected. You want to review your loan application for mistakes or inaccuracies. You want to improve your credit score by paying down your current outstanding debts. and you want to check for mistakes on your credit report, trying to increase your income, trying to get a side gig, a second job here and there, compare lender requirements. You want to apply for smaller loan amounts and consider using a co-signer. This could be a great opportunity also. And one thing I want you, don't panic, don't be stressed, don't be sad. There are alternatives to emergency loans. Emergency loans can offer you much needed relief in certain situations. Yet taking on more debt might not be the best solution if you are already struggling financially. Okay, so before you fill out a new loan application, examine your budget and make sure you can afford the monthly payments. If you think an additional debt is going to overextend you financially, guess what? An alternative approach might be a better choice. And there are a couple of things you can do. Try to negotiate adjusted hardship payment plans with your creditors. Temporarily consider making minimum payments on your credit cards to free up extra cash. Okay, this should be a short-term approach and not an ongoing habit though. Ask your employer for a paycheck advance. For smaller emergencies, consider a paycheck advance from apps like Earnings or similar services. Okay, there are other options. You can try to reduce expenses, sign up for a payment plan. You can sell unneeded items. You can ask family and friends. I'm just giving you a whole array, a whole constellation of options you can think about before actually reapplying for an emergency loan. All right, folks, this was it for today's conversation. I was speaking to you about how to get a large emergency loan for bad credit, no personal guarantee, and next day funding. And I gave you 5 proven steps that you can take right now to get the large emergency loan that you need. Number 1, know the types of emergency loans for poor credit. Number 2, understand how emergency loans for bad credit work. Number 3, you want to compare emergency loans for poor credit. Number 4, you want to pick the right emergency loan for bad credit. And number 5, you need to gather the required documents. Thank you so much for your attention, folks. I will speak to you another time, but until then, remember, stay marvelous.